depending upon the size of the organization, you may need developers where software developers might be fabulous, but they're not the same as AI developers. It's a different skill set or a different spin on the skill set. So it's different skills. And or you need to up level the skills of some of the people in your organization. You need to provide them some training because you're asking them to solve problems, but you're asking them to solve problems differently. So that requires, even for smart people, even for energetic people, even for enthusiastic people, you need to help them so they're moving into a new world, right? So those are the three fundamental shifts. And there are places I've seen that have done it well, and there are places that haven't done it so well. If you're talking about big tech companies, that's one thing.
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Patrick Reilly. He is the president of Resources in Action Incorporated. He has been coaching and consulting with executives for over 25 years, helping them become impactful leaders who others will follow. He specializes in working with CFOs and tech leaders. In the last few years, he has been supporting a number of AI-focused leaders to navigate acceptance and adoption of AI in their organizations. Patrick specializes in tech and healthcare. Some key clients include Google, Cisco, HP, Kaiser Permanente, and Grail, formerly Grail Bio. He has a passion for supporting leaders in developing their executive presence and helping them learn how to navigate organizational politics. Congrats on your passion for supporting leaders, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you. And I love your title, frankly. I just, because that's my MO, is that regardless of what the technology is, if I don't connect with people, the leader doesn't connect with people, it doesn't happen, right? And so,
yeah.
Anyway, so this is a cool subject for me. How's that?
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have you on the show to talk about the kind of leadership skills and how they've changed in the last few years as AI has really taken off, because I think there's so much pressure on leaders for like using these tools, or like there's the skill set they have in getting people to adopt them or knowing how to use them themselves. It seems like it'd be a wider skill gap than ever for leaders to be successful. So what are some of those gaps, and how do you see ways for people to overcome them?
Well, let's just say the gaps are large. And AI is a technology that's so substantive and is moving so fast and is fraught with so much risk that it really is requiring leaders who, even those who've been very successful, to really change their MO, right? Or to change how they operate in order to be successful. And that's, as you know, one of my favorite quotes of all time, I can't remember where it's from, is the only one who really likes change is a baby with a wet diaper. The rest of us have issues. So present company included. All right, so sorry. The sense of humor also helps. The first thing is this. It's happening. AI is here. It's happening. You might love it. You might hate it. I have two academics that I work with. One who thinks that it's the best thing in the entire world and it is so fabulous for academia. I have another friend who teaches an MBA program locally. She hates it because she finds that her students are like using AI to do their homework and they're not learning and thinking. So there's a lot to manage, right? But it's happening. So if you accept that it's true, like on a sunny day, you put sunblock on. On a rainy day, you use an umbrella. If you're in a place where it snows, and you wear a coat, right? Okay, so that's just, you have to accept reality. My first business mentor or coaching mentor, one of the things he left me with is at the end of the day, the most important thing, if you're helping people in organizations, is to accept the business reality. The business reality is it's here and it's changing things significantly. So then the question is, so if you accept that to be true, and I hardly recommend you do, then the question is, what do you do? So if you're a leader, the first thing you have to do is become literate and credible. You have to understand what it is somewhat. You don't have to be an expert, but you do have to understand what it is, how it works, what are some of the challenges, etc. That's number one, because people don't listen to you if you don't know about a subject and you're not credible. Okay, you don't have to be an AI developer, but you have to be credible. Number two is that the technology is essential, but the main shifts and the real significant changes occur within the leadership framework. It has to do with, how do I learn about this? How do I talk about it in really effective, inspiring, engaging ways? And how do I get the people on my team, the people in my organization, and my customers to accept that this is happening? And how do I get them to accept this in a way where they go, wow, this is great. I want more. Help me out. So that's the next step. Now, that being said, I'll go back to my first user case with someone I worked with who I guess I would refer to as my principal teacher, since he was the first person really sophisticated in AI who was hired by a new company because of his AI expertise. And you'd think, wow, this guy, he does have a landmark-like reputation in the marketplace. He gets to the new company, and of course, he's immediately rejected because he didn't learn it there. So it took him a year, literally a year, to do what it took for people to accept him, to embrace what he was bringing in, and to see that he had the chops, both technically and organizationally, to make this happen. Summary comment. So that's the next transition, is getting people to accept that you're not the devil, you're not the Messiah, you are just an informed person who is trying to help the team and customers do things better, more efficiently and effectively and safely. What I learned from him are there are three fundamental shifts, regardless of the size of the organization you're in, that you have to deal with. One is, because of the way that AI works, you have to make significant changes to your business strategy in terms of allocation of resources, where the money goes, who, et cetera, because it's a whole different way of doing business. Secondly, no small challenge, you have to make some changes to the culture, because there are habits that people have in terms of what they've done before. And this requires some changes in behavior, some changes in mindset, if you would. Changes in mindset, behavior, and actions. That essentially is culture change simplified. That's not so easy, especially when you have a large group of people, right? You're not, okay, it's like, yeah, okay, speaking to the choir. Third, there's a significant shift in terms of the talent that's needed to make this happen. Depending upon the size of the organization, you may need developers where software developers might be fabulous, but they're not the same as AI developers. It's a different skill set or a different spin on the skill set. So it's different skills. And or you need to up-level the skills of some of the people in your organization. You need to provide them some training, because you're asking them to solve problems, but you're asking them to solve problems differently. So that requires, even for smart people, even for energetic people, even for enthusiastic people, you need to help them so they're moving into a new world, right? So those are the three fundamental shifts. And there are places I've seen that have done it well, and there are places that haven't done it so well. If you're talking about big tech companies, that's one thing. The second place, and there are more levels of refinement I could make, but to keep the conversation, Carl, a little simple, I'm going to go for three. There's big tech companies. Then there's big companies. Let me just say like a Walmart or a Home Depot, where they need the technology. They need people to adopt it. They need people to understand it. But the development of that AI technology is not their fundamental business. Their fundamental business is having product available for you that's large scale, big time, all over the place. So they have to have the right setup, the right organization, the right resources to make that happen. And then lastly, what I'll say is you need a different approach for what I'm going to call medium and small size organizations, where they don't have the money, they can't take as much risk, and they have to figure out what's the right technology for us. I need to find people who have these skills to help me understand what it is that's out there and what will fit my business. And then I have to figure out how to make it happen. So there's different choice points and decisions based on the kind or the type of company. So there's that. Okay. And I haven't even gotten to your leadership question yet, have I?
No, but I mean,
But I
it
will.
all kind of falls under the leadership question because it's about understanding. Part of the solution to the leadership question is understanding what the problem is and what your audience is and what their needs are when you're trying to communicate these, and how the leader has to show up in order to have their message received and how to be seen as someone who's coming in with these tools because and who's wanting to help, and what the real like value is for the employees and the other people you need to get to use these things. Because a lot of people, they're seeing it as, oh, they're just trying to like replace me, or there's a lot of fear around it. And any sort of change, there's fear and anxiety. And so if you just come in with kind of, we're doing this now, get on board, you're going to get a lot of people digging their heels in or disconnecting because they're not seeing the value in it for them, and they're not seeing the whole picture from that the leadership perspective has.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you said, there's that innate fear of change that people have. And so when you're from a leadership perspective, when you understand that based on the size of your organization and the industry you're in and the people that you have working for you and what their skill sets are, unless you know and adapt your approach to your unique circumstances, then you're almost guaranteed to fail, because you're not taking into account all the human side of things and different emotions involved in that. And even though on paper the tech might be a huge win for everyone involved, if you're not able to communicate that and get people emotionally invested in the change and seeing how it's going to help them, it's never going to work, because people are messy, and they don't see the logical roadmap to success that the leaders might see in a boardroom. But it's much different perspective when you're one of the employees.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to also add customers, because there's significantly impact there. So two things pop to mind as I'm listening to you. One is, I had a conversation just yesterday with a client who's very troubled in a good way. Is she's got a new boss who is very different than what she had before. But here's the parallel or the corollary. Literally, just before I got on with you, I sent her an email because I had this thought this morning. Many leaders who are successful and use this approach, and it does engender their success, is to think about this as hunters, right? So they go out there, they see what's out in the marketplace, they go out, they get their big guns and their big tools, they grab it, and they boom. What I said to my client is that you have to approach this with a new boss more like fishing, where you don't know who he is. He's really rolls differently. And you have to think about, okay, so I'm going to go a little slower. I'm going to figure out where the fish are, what the bait is, what's the location, what are the tools that I need to have, and I need to pull him towards me. I think that's really parallel to what we're talking about here as leadership in this context. You have to look at the situation you have and then ask yourself, what are the tools I need to have in place? How do I talk? How do I approach my team as fish, if you would, not land animals? And what do I have to do to create the conditions to pull them towards me? I think that's a real significant mindset for getting people to buy into AI. Second thing, another phrase that one of my first coaching mentors used that I still like it, I can't get it out of my head. He says, if you want to be successful, you always have to think about things from the perspective of what's important to the other person. And important is a very useful word in English for two reasons. One is it drives the line between logic, data, analytics, and what feels good or what is attractive to me. And it has components of both. And what I have found again and again is if I get a clear picture of what's important to the other person, I'm much more effective in getting their attention, keeping their attention, and engaging with them. Now, it's not that easy sometimes, and especially if you're looking at an entire organization who, as you say, aptly point out, it can be anxious and nervous about this. How do I put the bait in the water for them that they go, well, this is a little different, but maybe I'll take a nibble, right? So that's That's the other piece. And so I do have to do my homework about what's important. Okay.
Yeah, I like that reframe from the hunter that's going out there and kind of trying to force things on it, and versus the fisherman that's putting out lures and baits and is trying to entice people towards them. But if you don't have the right message, you're not going to draw in the right people, and the same message that works for one person is not going to necessarily work for another. So you have to understand your audience a lot better than I think most people in the executive field are adept at doing when it comes to listening and really connecting with their teams on that sort of level. And also, I hadn't heard that nuanced the breakdown of important, the word important there, because it does. I like that it combines the data and the emotional side of things, because it's something that, especially in the tech-driven business world, they're very systems and logic and all these very like neat, straight lines, and they don't like to necessarily get too deep in the messy gray areas of human emotions. But it's really essential for success, because as much as we like to think of ourselves as thinking beings that feel, we're very much feeling beings that occasionally think. And so if you don't accept and respond to the emotional reality of the people around you, you're going to struggle to communicate with them effectively, because you're not talking to the right part of their brain that's making the decisions.
Yeah. I'm going to digress. It's remind me of a friend who was looking to buy a car a number of years ago, and he wanted a Ford Explorer. Like, that was his thing. And he is a very data-driven guy. And he did all his homework, and he found out that Ford did not make the exact kind of vehicle he wanted, but he had all his specs, and he negotiated and he worked with them, and he figured out, he was able to get someone to create one that was just exactly what I wanted. And finally I said to him, and so how come? And he says, well, because I like the color, I like the shape, and I like to have these pieces together. It makes me feel good. And what struck me about that is his purchase was guided by both, right? And he drove towards that. He needed to have the specifics. He needed to have the data. He needed to know everything there. But at the end of the day, the purchase was also guided by the fact that this is just the color he liked. This is the shape he liked. This is, the particular power of the engine that made him feel good. And so it was like, oh, okay. And so that was confirmation of my understanding of the word important in a much more significant and real-time way. And I've been watching it ever since. And I always actually ask my clients, what's important to your boss? What's important to the people on your team? I ask myself this all the time. Also, for anybody here who's in personal relationships with anyone, I highly recommend thinking about this as well, with partners, friends, children, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very useful construct. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you bringing up that last little bit, because it is something that I think the business world needs to kind of wake up to, the fact that the people involved have lives outside of work, and that there's these relationships, the tools that help you connect with your team are the same ones that help you connect with spouses and parents and loved ones. And it's really that H to H side of things that I talked about at the beginning, where if you're able to see people as human beings, not just a job title, not just who they directly report to, whatever team they're on, but understanding that and seeing them as a person first, and understanding what their perspective is, then it allows you to better communicate and inspire them to act and build the trust that you need to have with them in order for them to follow you on the AI transformation you want your business to go through. Because if you haven't built that rapport and that relationship yet, then they're not going to lean in. They're not going to be enticed by your message, because they're coming from a sense of fear or uncertainty, because they don't really have that relationship. So I would love to hear more about, you mentioned you have like some success stories and some failure stories. What's kind of for the one that didn't work out, what was kind of the key mistake that they made?
Well, you've already touched on it quite a few times, which is they didn't Well, I'll say it differently. They did not create trust with their people on their team. To go back to a phrase that the research that was done originally by Amy Edmondson of Harvard, who was the primary developer of the concept of psychological safety. They didn't create the requisite psychological safety for people to be comfortable enough to trust and say, I really don't want to walk out on the ice because I know that it's dangerous. And so the way you're presenting this is suggesting there are some cracks in the ice, so I'm not going to. And in that case, it didn't work. And people, let's just say they had to reboot, if you would. In the one case that I'm thinking of that you triggered for me, these people had, the two leaders of this operation had really big reputations, but they didn't pay attention enough to their audience in terms of engaging. I mean, that was the basic breakdown. They did not pay enough attention to listening to the audience, paying attention to what their concerns and their worries were. They didn't pay enough attention to some of the data that suggested that they had to go about this differently in the past. Those are the two big twisting points. And both of these people effectively lost their jobs. I mean, they're still there, but what they were doing before. So these are pretty, talented, accomplished people, and the jobs they have no longer are the same that they were before. And it was because they didn't pay attention to the data that was different. And secondly, they didn't create psychological safety for the people to raise different perspectives and different points of view. That's why they failed.
Makes sense to me. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Patrick. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and subscribe. If you want to learn more about myself or Patrick, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.